I want to bring in now Jamil Jaffer, who's a former chief counsel and senior advisor for the US Senate Foreign Relations Committee. Thanks very much indeed, Jamil, for taking the time. What did you make of both the retrospective and the comments about the immediate future of that conflict during the address? Good morning.
Well, good morning, Richard. In some ways, it wasn't surprising. I think we all expected the president to say that this conflict would be over in the near future. 2 to 3 weeks was the timeline. I think that over the last few days and weeks, we've been hearing and expected as well. It's obviously, the questions are, will he meet the objectives he laid out either at the beginning of the war or laid out primarily again today, right? Will Iran be prevented from having a nuclear weapon forever in the future? Will it be prevented from being able to employ its terrorist proxies? And will its other forces have been significantly diminished? Now, there's no question, Richard, that the Iranian Navy, as the president said, has been severely decimated. There's no doubt that their missile launch infrastructure has been decimated. But their actual number of missiles, their number of drones, their nuclear capabilities, their enriched uranium, as far as we know, that has not yet been destroyed. And I think those are much harder questions, and those will be hard objectives to meet in 2 to 3 weeks.
Many people felt that the aim, one of the main aims, as well as really disabling any nuclear capability that Iran might develop, should be regime change. And of course, this whole thing began with the assassination of the supreme leader of Iran, and then his son replacing him. But he's reiterated that regime change is not our goal. It was in Venezuela to an extent. He physically deposed and effectually replaced the leader of that country. It's curious, this, isn't it? Was this simply a hit to make tacit any potential nuclear threat that Iran posed, or do you think that he did secretly aim to have regime change and then to be able to have that credit to his name?
Well, there was no doubt that on the first day of the operation, President Trump, posted a Truth Social post wherein he called on the Iranian people, once the U.S. had completed its bombing, to rise up, taking advantage of a unique, once-in-a-lifetime, I think, type of opportunity he referred to take back the regime and replace it with a new regime. And so it was none other than the president of the United States who himself called for regime change, admittedly not brought on by the United States, but enabled by the United States, by the people of Iran. And he doesn't appear to be calling for that today, although yesterday from the White House, he did say that the regime has changed. Now, to be sure, he did talk about decapitation today, and to be sure, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei is gone. His son, Mujtaba Khamenei, now in power. So the regime has changed in some sense, probably not in a positive way. Mujtaba Khamenei, I think, is by all accounts more brutal than his father, and not inclined to do anything that much differently, if anything, at least in a positive way. So we'll see what that all means. But confusing messages from the White House. On one hand, saying regime change was never our goal, except that it was said on day one, and was said as recently as yesterday when he said the regime has changed.
You're absolutely right. There is a great deal of confusion, I think, here, Jamil, because he said that the US didn't need Middle Eastern oil, but that it's a global market and high oil prices will have an impact on the US. They're having a massive impact on us here in the UK and will continue to do so. It's not just filling up at the petrol pumps. It's first-time mortgages. It will be food in supermarkets because, of course, they have to pay their hauliers. And he's framing the conflict not as a necessity for the United States, but a mission to help allies in the region, all very altruistic. But then in the next sentence, he said the war was necessary to protect the safety of America.
No, that's exactly right, Richard. And I do think, look, let's be candid about Iran and its current regime and its activities over the last multiple decades. Iran has regularly and without any compunction murdered Americans around the globe, including in Iraq and Syria, including as recently in the last year, using its proxy forces and the like. So Iran has been at war with the United States for years. Now, we have brought the fight back to them in this instance. The president brought the fight to them in his first term against Qasem Soleimani. And let's be candid, Iran has been doing that. They have been choosing to do that. They have chosen to pursue a nuclear program. They chose to enrich uranium to 60%, which is just 5% of work away from the 90% needed enriched for weapons grade uranium. So they're the ones doing that. And so in a lot of ways, this war is on their doorstep because of their own actions, the regime's actions. Now, all that being said, there's also no doubt that the United States was looking to defend itself here, to work with our allies, Israel and our Arab allies in the region, to stop this regime from going forward. And yet, the job is not done. The job will not likely be done in 2 to 3 weeks. And the president, no doubt, can claim a certain amount of victory. Our forces have been very successful, but we have not completed the objectives he set out on day one. We're not going to likely complete the objectives he set out today.
And, puzzling as well, Jamil, that at the start of the speech, he said, we don't have to be there, only to be followed by claims that the war is necessary to prevent a nuclear conflict. So it's a confusing message, really, intrinsically, about what the point of this war is.
Well, look, Richard, I do think that the president has a point in the following sense. There's no doubt that Iran, left to its own devices, would continue to pursue a nuclear weapon, would continue to enrich uranium to high levels, would continue to pursue nuclear weapons design, ballistic missile delivery capability, and eventually threaten not just its neighbors, but Europe and eventually the United States with said nuclear weapons. Now, the real question is today, if they continue to maintain 440 or so kilograms of 60% high enriched uranium, and we have not taken that out or captured it, or as the president said about oil to our European allies, have not taken that enriched uranium, have we really terminated their nuclear program? That seems hard to believe. And might they not take the lesson from this, that their only solution to preventing this kind of embarrassment and attack from happening again is to actually use that highly enriched uranium to build a nuclear weapon? That's the real fear, and that's part of why it's so important, if you're going to get in this business, to finish the job once and for all.
And he said that he did what no other president was willing to do in the past. Although it is worth noting, is it not, that he had 4 years in office before this, and he didn't do anything about Iran.
Well, Richard,
he did go to war with them anyway. Sorry.
Right, that's right. To be fair to President Trump, he has done two things that I think no other president has had the temerity to do. One, he took out the leader of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard's Quds Force, Qasem Soleimani, and that practically went unresponded to. There were limited attacks against U.S. bases, but it was largely unresponded to. He's now conducted a significant campaign, yes, admittedly on the backs of the Israelis having taken out a significant portion of Iran's air defenses, but he's conducted a significant air campaign against Iranian forces, has significantly diminished their capacity to act in their navy, has significantly diminished their capacity to act militarily at home. That being said, we have not changed the regime. We have not terminated their nuclear program, and they still maintain a significant number of missiles and drones, albeit not the launch capacity to use them in the immediate future. So we've achieved a lot of important goals, and he has done things that no other president had the guts to do, but the job is not done. And the question is, will President Trump have the further guts to complete the job, or in 2 to 3 weeks will we walk away and say, we've done what we can, off we go?
Now, this conflict has also caused some of his ever-loyal MAGA ranks across the country to not just raise their eyebrows, but actively say to the media, look, we're not happy about this. We don't want American lives being put at risk and being lost for the aims that are possibly achievable here. It's a real full sell of the war to the American people, and I imagine that they're hoping that having this speech in the form of this rather stately address will actually help the messages that the president is trying to sell sink in, not least of all to his MAGA base, who he needs so desperately.
Well, I do think that the MAGA base probably has some frustration with the president. He did say that he would, end these long wars, bring America back to a state of peace, focus on making America great again, and not be involved in these foreign interventions. And of course, here we are. We've gone into Venezuela. We've gone into Iran. We may go into Cuba. Now, I tend to believe that these are appropriate missions for the United States, appropriate exercises of American power to very real threats. That being said, I don't think the MAGA base is in the same place, and I think they're struggling with how is a war in Venezuela or a regime change in Venezuela, a war in Iran that raises oil prices at home, and a potential war in Cuba, how is that making America great again? That's the question they're asking, and that's the question I think the president is trying hard to answer and maybe having some success, but the longer this war goes on, and this may be why we see the president talk about ending this war in 2 to 3 weeks, makes it harder to make that case to his base. And I think you're exactly right. He's trying to balance what I think is an appropriate agenda to effectuate American power and security overseas, while also dealing with a base that he told he would not get in these type of conflicts, and yet, for better or for worse, has been.
Jamil, many thanks for taking the time. Jamil Jaffer there, former chief counsel and senior advisor for the U.S. Senate Foreign Relations Committee.